Children who need to be taught to respect traditional moral values are being taught that they have an inalienable right to be gay.
30 years ago, the Tories introduced the first piece of homophobic legislation for generations. It was called Section 28. What it did is ban the so-called promotion of homosexual lifestyles.
All of those children are being cheated of a sound start in life. Yes, cheated.
Now, what that meant in practice is we didn't get LGBTQ education at all in schools. I remember that because when I was at school, believe it or not, Section 28 was still in place. It's worth remembering that as I walk in the centre of London's LGBTQ community, this is of course Soho. A few weeks ago, the Tories actually stood a candidate in the council elections who believed that homosexuality was immoral. She lost. But it is worth remembering the damage inflicted on LGBTQ people, including people walking around me here, the rights and freedoms that were won at such cost and sacrifice by LGBTQ people, but also how far we got to go. Tell you what, the struggle for LGBTQ rights was fucking hard. In the early 70s, if you were gay, you were seen as a puff, a pervert, people were spat at in the streets, routinely abused. But critically, we had all these laws which enforced discrimination. Forget about the right even to a civil partnership, the right to adopt, the right to the same age of consent as straight couples, whether it be laws which didn't protect gay people from discrimination, and of course Section 28. So you had this whole set of laws. At the same time, the majority, a large majority of people thought being gay was wrong. That's what the British Attitude Survey showed. So in the 80s, combined with the HIV/AIDS epidemic, it was one of the most horrendous times to be gay. The Conservatives obviously were launching an assault against gay people and LGBT people generally, whilst the Labour leadership and the Labour right saw it as an embarrassing distraction or something that would undermine support amongst many traditional Labour voters. So the people who stood against it were the Labour left, like Jeremy Corbyn at the time. He said during the debate of Section 28, "I appeal to the House to reject the clause, which is the start of a slippery slope to all intolerant and discriminatory atmosphere in this and so many other areas of our national and local life and in society as a whole." Diane Abbott, this isn't a liberal, intolerant bill. It is based on a complete misapprehension of what goes on in schools and of the policies of some local authorities. It is based, in short, on recycled Conservative election smears. It will lead to an increase in human misery. Now, you'll often hear me slagging off Tony Blair, don't get me started, seriously, but you did need a Labour government to introduce legislation to get rid of all that discrimination. And even when the Tories, who voted against all of that over and over again, eventually introduced equal marriage, most Tory MPs didn't actually vote for it. You need a Labour government, but you did also need people campaigning and protesting, and it was those who were demonised, humiliated, ridiculed, not just LGBTQ people, but also their political allies on the left. We also have to remember the thousands of gay and bisexual men who were locked up both before and after partial decriminalisation of homosexuality. That was back in 1967. That included Alan Turing, who was a British war hero, who was sterilised and driven to suicide as a result of his persecution. Gay people are still growing up in schools, in communities where they're exposed to casual homophobia from the earliest age, and what that does is internalise a sense of shame. It's one of the reasons mental distress is far higher amongst LGBTQ people than it is the rest of the population, including, I'm afraid, suicide rates, including drug and alcohol abuse as well. It's also true that same-sex couples can't really walk holding hands, something which I think most people who are straight take for granted for fear of verbal or physical abuse. It's also true that LGBTQ services are being decimated across the country because of austerity. The same with mental health services that LGBTQ people disproportionately rely on as well. And we also have a vicious anti-trans campaign in the media at the moment, which is so horribly reminiscent of the media campaign against gay people, and an attempt to stop the law being updated to end this humiliating medicalised transition period for trans people. So far to go still. And we've got to remember the courage and determination of those who went before. It wasn't that long ago when the law was viciously discriminatory against LGBTQ people and attitudes were overwhelmingly hostile and we had very few allies. that we've got to finish the battle by standing on the shoulders of the giants who won us that progress, and we've got to keep fighting. And all the people around here, their lives have been transformed by that change. And if you're straight, as well as gay, bisexual, lesbian, trans, you can help finish those battles.